Okay, we are picking up on page 1316. This is Act 4, Scene 7, which we're going to get through somewhat quickly. Where we left off was Laertes arrives back, and he and the king are talking about the revenge that Laertes seeks. They know that Hamlet has returned, and the king gives Laertes doesn't give. He suggests a means of revenge, beginning with about line 108, okay? He says, I loved your father, don't think that I didn't. And then he goes on, and he says at the end of that speech, line 120, 21, line 122, what would you undertake to show yourself your father's son indeed, more than in words? Pass it over to the back. So what would you do to prove your love for your father? Laertes, to cut his throat in the church. Okay? I would murder him in a church. So in the Middle Ages, and even in Shakespeare's day, to kill somebody in a church is pretty much a go straight to hell kind of a sin. King, no place indeed should murder sanctuarize. That is, no place should, let's look at the gloss. 125. Protect from punishment. Okay? That is, no place should be protected from the punishment for murder. Right? There shouldn't be any place where revenge is off limits, he is suggesting. Okay? Revenge should have no bounds. But, okay, he says, keep this close within your chamber. Keep close within your chamber. In other words, Laertes, I want you to go back to wherever you're staying and close the door and just stay there. All right? Hamlet's returned. We don't want Hamlet to know that you're here. He says, we'll put on those shall praise your excellence. That is, I will suggest to others that around Hamlet they praise all of your good qualities and set a double varnish on the fame the Frenchman gave you. Now, previously, last Friday, we discussed that passage where the king says, we've heard from people in France, a Frenchman, that you are praised very, very highly. In one particular aspect of your character is praised more than anything else, and that is his fencing ability. He mentions his rapier, all right? There's a difference between a rapier and a sword. Sword, for sword fighting in the Middle Ages and in Shakespeare's day, it's a broadsword. And it's usually fought two-handed, and the way you kill somebody is not with a one-handed slice or thrust. It's by beating them to death because the broadsword is so big. A rapier is a very thin blade. Usually they're used only for fencing, and the blade is actually, if you look at the tip, looking down along the length, the blade is square. It narrows to a point, right? So, and it's also very thin, like the thinness of this part of this marker. So you can take a blade, hold the handle here and the tip here, and flex it, right? The way you would win in a fencing match, okay, not to the death, in a fencing match is you get points by strikes on the body. The strikes have to be with the point, not slapping with the side. And the foil, the rapier, is usually in a fencing match, it's tipped. It has some kind of like a rubber tip or plastic tip on it to keep one from being punctured with it. So, he says, here's what we're going to do. We're going to praise you up one side and down the other regarding your fencing skills. He says, he, that is Hamlet, being remiss, most generous and free from all contriving, will not peruse the foils. Now, in that earlier scene, he said, when people talk about your fencing skills, your rapier skills, Hamlet gets jealous. He's very envious of Laertes' reputation. Why? Why does somebody get jealous of somebody else's reputation? Because they think that the praise that other person is getting should be theirs, all right? So, suggested Hamlet thinks he should be considered the best. So, he, being remiss, most generous, and free from all contriving, meaning Hamlet expects the best of people. Hamlet doesn't doesn't conspire against other people. Notice what Claudius doesn't know about Hamlet. Okay? Ever since the ghost, Hamlet, in a sense, has been conspiring. Right? From here on, if I put on an antic disposition, don't let anybody know. One of the big questions, critical questions of the play is, when does Hamlet put on an antic disposition? Does he ever put on an antic disposition? Or is Hamlet really crazy? Okay? A lot of questions. So, he says, we'll put on this fencing match so that with ease or with a little shuffling you may choose a sword unbeaten. That is, a sword that doesn't have a rubber or wooden tip or something on the end, so that in a scuffle you can pierce him. Okay? And in a passive practice, requite him for your father. You can kill him for your father. Laertes, I like that idea. So the first plotted means of killing Hamlet is with an unbaited sword, and he'll be stabbed with it. Laertes says, let's ensure that will happen. How? While in Paris, he saw a mountebank, that is a false pharmacist who sold poisons. And I have an unction, he says, that I'll put on the tip of that sword in merely a scratch. So if I just barely nick him, he'll die. It won't be immediate, but it'll be within 30 minutes at one point, Laertes says. Okay? I'll touch my point with this contagion that if I gall him slightly, he'll be dead. King. Good idea. So now we've got one way to kill him. Now there's two ways to kill him. And the king's like, I'm going to come up with a third way. Okay? He says, we'll make a solemn wager on your cunnings, on your abilities. When in your motion you are hot and dry, as make your bouts more violent to that end, in that he calls for drink, I'll have prepared a chalice for the nonce, that is, for the occasion, whereupon but sipping, if he by chance escape your venom stuck, our purpose may hold there. And he says there's a noise. The chalice that he will prepare, he's going to put poison in. So if Laertes doesn't stab him, doesn't cut him with the point of the sword, they will still be able to poison him with the drink. In other words, there's no way Hamlet's walking out of this alive, right? They hear a noise outside, and the queen comes in. And she says, Laertes, your sister's drowned. Where? Notice he doesn't ask how. Why? There's only one way to drown. Your head is underwater and you lose oxygen, okay? Where? And she gives us an image. There's a brook, a stream, a willow grows over it. Willow trees at the sides of banks of streams and such often do lean over. And she says she was pleating what she calls a crown. There on the pendant boughs, her crowned weeds clambering to hang, she made a crown like a wreath of flowers and vines. And she was climbing out over this brook because she wanted to hang this wreath on the tree. She climbs out, the branch breaks, she falls down in. I ought to put on the D12. She falls down in, and Gertrude, apparently there's an eyewitness who doesn't do anything because she gives us a very full description. And how she lays there on the brook with her gown all outflowing around her. And there's a fantastic painting done in the mid-19th century of this, of Ophelia lying there, eyes open, looking upward, this beautiful gown all around her, almost like she's in the middle of a circle. And she's just sitting there and slowly floating down, enjoying that. And unbeknownst to her, Gertrude says, what do the clothes do? Well, what do clothes do when you jump into water with them? They get wet, meaning they soak up all that moisture and they become heavy. And it pulls her down. Okay? Then is she drowned? She's drowned. Laertes. Too much of water hast thou, poor Ophelia, therefore I forbid my tears. But yet it is our trick, nature, custom holds, let shame what it will. When these are gone, the woman will be out. So he says, adieu, my lord, I have a speech of fire that fain would blaze, but that this folly drowns it. In other words, oh, I could really talk. But this fool, her death, okay, Act 5. So, she tells us, Gertrude tells us, Ophelia dies how? I don't mean drowning. We know that. Intentional, unintentional. She says she was climbing out on this tree branch. It broke, she fell. That implies unintentional. Shakespeare gives us, Act 5, Scene 1, a comedic scene. Well, part of it, the beginning of it's comedic. You have these two characters, they're grave diggers. They're called clowns, okay? They don't come out with the big nose and the hair and all that. They're just grave diggers. And the first gravedigger or clown says to the second, is she to be buried in Christian burial when she willfully seeks her own salvation? Willfully seeks her own salvation is a euphemism for what? Suicide. Okay? Little background. Both in Shakespeare's day in England, but more so in Denmark, and there are places in the United States where this used to happen. New Orleans is one. You often had to reuse graves because you don't have the space, right? Denmark's a very small country. So older graves would be dug up to put new bodies in. And that's what we're going to see in this scene. There's a guy there digging a grave, and there's a skull, and he throws it up, and there's another skull. So they're digging in this grave to make a grave for Ophelia. And he asks, is she to receive Christian burial when she sought her own salvation? Clown, I tell thee she is. Therefore make her grave straight. And you've got a gloss down there. Straightway, immediately. Some interpret straight meaning east to west in a direct line. Why? Because in the medieval church, as it is today, still in some branches of Christianity, graves are aligned east-west. For the simple reason that when Jesus returns and the bodies are resurrected, they will rise with their head getting up facing the east. Why? Because that's where the resurrection will come from. Okay? Jesus, the Son of righteousness, all that kind of stuff. So, she is. Why? The coroner has sat on her and finds it Christian burial. In England, when someone dies, there has to be a coroner's inquest. The coroner has to determine the cause of death. Same thing essentially applies in the United States. It's the coroner that issues the death certificate. It's the coroner that determines cause of death. For the vast majority of people, it's just natural causes. If it's car accident, it's car accident, If there's no indication, there might be an autopsy. So, the coroner says it was accidental. That's why she gets Christian burial. Why? Because the medieval church did not bury suicides within church grounds, within a church cemetery. That's hallowed ground. That's holy ground. Suicides were quote unquote unholy. According to the Catholic Church, suicide was the unforgivable sin against the Holy Spirit because you couldn't repent of it. You can't kill yourself and go, oops, I'm sorry. Too late at that point. Okay? So, the first clown, he's trying to wrap his head around this. How? How can she get Christian burial unless she drowned herself in her own defense? Own defense against what? Something else. That is, she drowned herself to protect her against something else. It's an illogical statement. It doesn't make any sense. But it is bringing up an idea Hamlet's going to talk about, and it's an idea that Gertrude has referenced before and that Hamlet has referenced before. Okay? Second clown, tis found so. That is, that's what he determined. It must be se offendendo, footnote, for se defendendo. Term used in verdicts of justifiable homicide. That is, se defendendo means it was an act of defense, self-defense. The clown says se offendendo. That means it was an act of offense against the self. It cannot be else. For here lies the point. If I drown myself wittingly, knowingly, if I drown myself wittingly, it argues an act. That is, I did something. And an act has three branches. That is, three components, three elements. That is, to act, to do, to perform. He's a moron. Okay? The guy is, when it says clown, it means he's an uneducated, very simple person. All right? Therefore, she drowned herself willingly. Notice what he's implying. She climbed up on that branch knowing the branch was going to break. Okay? Or what Gertrude said wasn't true, and she threw herself in the water. Second clown. Nay, but hear you, good man Delver, that is digger, give me leave. First clown. He's on a roll. Here lies the water. Okay. Here stands the man. Okay. If the man go to the water and drown himself, it is willy-nilly, mark you that, it's suicide. But if the water come to him and drown him, he drowns not himself. Argo, that is ergo, he that is not guilty of his own death shortens not his own life. Is this law? It is. It's the coroner's inquest law. Okay? Second clown gets to the real point. Will you have the truth on it? That is, do you really want to know why she's being given Christian burial? If this had not been a gentlewoman, she would have been buried out of Christian burial. The only reason she's being buried within the hallowed ground of the church cemetery is because she's not a lowly commoner like we are. She is the daughter of the king's chief advisor. In other words, she's the 1%. She's not literally aristocracy, but she's the upper middle class, or the upper class if you want. First clown, bingo. That's why there thou sayest means. You nailed it. And the more pity that great folk should have countenance in this world to drown or hang themselves. That is privilege. That the great have the privilege. The right, privilege literally means right by law, okay? To kill themselves. More than they're even Christian, that is, their Christian brethren and sisters. So he starts digging again. The first clown mentions Adam and his profession. Was he a gentleman? Yeah, he was the first that ever bore arms. He had none. Arms. The first guy is referring not to military arms, but arms. How dost thou understand the scripture? The scripture says Adam did. Could he dig without arms? Okay. So, they keep talking back and forth. Hamlet comes in with Horatio at a distance. So, if this room is the stage, and this is literally a little bit smaller than Shakespeare's Globe stage, so they're over here digging. Hamlet and Horatio come in over through this door, and they see them from a distance. Okay? And the first clown starts to sing a song, and Hamlet hears it and says, has this fellow no feeling of his business that sings at grave making? What should Hamlet implies? What should the clown, the gravedigger, what should his attitude be about his work? He should be a little solemn. He should be a little sad. Somebody has died recently. He's digging their final resting place. Horatio, custom hath made it in him a property of easiness. That is, he's been doing this so long, he no longer cares about the people who've died. Okay? Hamlet, you're right. First clown keeps singing. Throws up a skull. And Hamlet says, page 1320, line 67 or so, that skull had a tongue in it and could sing once, like the clown is singing. How the knave jowls it to the ground, as if it were Cain's jawbone that did the first murder. Why, this might be the pate, that is the head, of a politician, which this ass now overreaches. One that would circumvent God, might it not? How can a politician circumvent God? Circumvent, to go around. Hamlet's talking about breaking laws. Horatio, yeah, you're right, it could. Or it could have been a courtier, which could say, good morrow, sweet lord. How dost thou, sweet lord? This might be my lord such and one that praised my lord such and one's horse. That is, he's talking about a courtier, a person who sucks up to those in power. And we know that's what he means by how he puts words into this courtier's mouth, the kind of language, the kind of things he talks about. Horatio, yeah. And now my lady Worms, chapless, without lips, and knocked about the mazzard with a sexton's spade. Okay? First clown throws up another skull. This is, I think, the third that's now been dug out of this grave. And Hamlet says, now this could have been the skull of a lawyer. Where be his quiddities now? Quiddities. Lawyers are known for, to use another QU word, quibbling on the niceties of words' meanings. Bill Clinton gave a perfect kind of master class in this back in 1998 when he was being investigated with the Paula Jones stuff. And he was asked a question about having sex with Monica Lewinsky and such. And it had to do with the verb is, to be. And Clinton responded to a question, well, it all depends on what the meaning of the word is. Well, everybody knows what the meaning of the word is. But he was looking at it from the past tense, was, if I remember correctly. Was is not is, obviously, okay? So, Hamlet goes on. So he says it could have been a lawyer, and then he says could have been a buyer of real estate, could have been a whole bunch of things. All right? So he and Horatio go back and forth. Hamlet speaks to the first clown, and Hamlet asks whose grave this is. Mine, sir, the clown says. Hamlet, I think it's mine. Indeed, for you are in it, right? Because he's in the grave, throwing the dirt out. For thou liest in it. Clown, you lie out on it, sir, and therefore it is not yours. For my part, I do not lie in it, yet it is mine. He's talking about, I am not prone in it. Hamlet's saying he lies, speaks an untruth in it. Thou dost lie in it, to be in it and say it is thine. 'Tis for the dead, not for the quick. That is, you are lying because it's not yours, because you're not dead. Okay? They go back and forth. Hamlet asks, okay, who is to be buried in it? One that was a woman, but rest her soul, she's dead. Notice, was a woman. What does the was mean? But is no longer. Why? Because the thing that's going to be put in that is no longer male nor female, because the she is dead. That is, the soul is gone. The soul is the she, so to speak. Hamlet, how absolute the knave is. And what he means, well, look at the gloss. Positive, decided by. No, I don't think that's, I think what Hamlet is saying, how literal this guy is. We must speak by the card, Horatio, that is, with precision. We have to be precise. So, Hamlet asks the first gravedigger, how long hast thou been a grave maker? We're going to find out how old Hamlet is. Let's see. Of all the day of the year, I came to it that day that our last king, Hamlet, overcame Fortinbras, that is, Fortinbras Senior of Norway. So, he says, I began digging graves when Hamlet Senior killed Fortinbras Senior. Hamlet, how long is that? How long ago was that? You don't know that? Every fool can tell that. It was the very day that young Hamlet was born. He that is mad and sent to England. Why was he sent to England? Well, because he's mad. Shall recover his wits there. Or, if he don't, 'tis no great matter. It's not a problem if he's crazy in England. Why? 'Twill not be seen in him there. There the men are as mad as he. Everyone in England is crazy. Now you have to imagine Shakespeare's throwing that out there as a laugh line for the audience, for both the people in the yard, the groundlings, and those in the seats. Okay? Little self-deprecation always works. So, Hamlet says, how came he mad? That is, how did Hamlet become mad? Obviously, the gravedigger does not know he's talking to Hamlet. Very strangely. How strangely? By losing his wits. Well, that is how one becomes mad. Upon what ground? That is, upon what basis? What caused Hamlet to lose his wits, is what Hamlet is asking. Why here in Denmark? That is, he lost his mind here in Denmark. And then he says, I have been sexton here, man and boy, 30 years. He started digging graves 30 years ago, which was the very day he says Hamlet Jr. was born. Hamlet is 30 years old. Now, does that affect your previous reading of the play up to this point? Does Hamlet come across from the beginning of the play to here as 30 years old? Not for most people. Most people, it sounds like he's late teens, maybe early 20s. Why? Because usually to be at university, you're, well, in Shakespeare's day, mid-teens. Usually would start around 13, 14. Finish 17, 18. Okay? And Hamlet's still at the University of Wittenberg. a lot of, graduate students will joke about. He's like a graduate student. He keeps taking one class after another. So, Hamlet asks, how long will a man lie in the earth before he rots? He says, well, if he hasn't rotten before, that is, if he hasn't had some kind of disease that has eaten up his body, 8 or 9 years, unless he's a tanner. Why? Because a tanner works with chemicals that he uses, or she uses, in order to tan a hide and stuff, and that tanning process starts to preserve the tanner's skin. So a tanner will not decompose as quickly. Okay? So Hamlet asks, whose grave was this? First clown. A whoreson mad fellows it was. Whose do you think it was? I don't know. And the first clown says, this was Yorick, the king's jester. Hamlet says, let me see that. And he takes the skull and he says, alas, poor Yorick. That line is often misquoted everywhere. I mean, political writers, newspaper, magazine, journalists, etc., they'll say something like, alas, poor Yorick, I knew him well. It's not what Hamlet says. Hamlet says, alas, poor Yorick, I knew him, Horatio. And Hamlet tells us how. A fellow of infinite jest, of most excellent fancy, he hath borne me on his back 1,000 times, and now how abhorred in my imagination it is. That is, when Hamlet was a young boy, he used to get on Yorick's back, and Yorick would give him rides, would carry him around, tell jokes to him. And he says, and now how abhorred in my imagination it is. My gorge rises at it. His throat. He means like he's going to vomit. Here hung those lips that I have kissed I know not how oft. Where be your jibs, your jokes now? Your gambols, your songs? Now get you to my lady's chamber and tell her, let her paint an inch thick. Okay, my lady's chamber. That could refer to his mother. Or it could refer to any woman because of what he's talking about. It's not specific to Gertrude. Now get you to my lady's chamber and tell her, let her paint an inch thick. That is, put an inch of thickness, a paint on her face. To this favor she must come. That is, no matter how much makeup you put on, this is what you become. Where else has Hamlet suggested this? Remember when he talks to Claudius after he kills Polonius? And Claudius asks, where is he? And Hamlet says, at supper. At supper? Where? And he says, not where he is eating, but where aught is eaten. A certain convocation of politic worms is even at him now. And he goes on and talks about your fat emperor and your lean beggar are variable service, variable dishes. What? He says, we fat things to fat ourselves. We fat animals to fat ourselves. We fat ourselves for maggots, worms. This is another memento mori. Reminder of death. Okay? It was standard practice during Shakespeare's day. In portraiture, famous people had their paintings made. To somewhere in that painting to have a skull. Often the person's hand is resting on the skull. The person is painted during the prime of their life. Young, handsome, beautiful, whatever. And there's always a skull. For what purpose? To remind the viewer that this will become this. No matter how young, beautiful you are now, This is what you will ultimately become. Okay? Make her laugh at that. So he asked Horatio, Horatio, tell me one thing. What's that? You think Alexander looked like this? That is Alexander the Great. Yeah. Yep, smelled like that too. To what base uses we may return, Horatio? Base, as in foundation, like the earth. He's going to build an idea. Why may not imagination trace the noble dust of Alexander till it find it stopping a bunghole? A bunghole, that's the hole in a cask, like of ale or wine. So he's saying, why may we not trace Alexander's evolution from king of the known civilized world at his highest powers to becoming the clay that is stopping up a beer barrel? Horatio, twere to consider too curiously. That's going into too much detail, Hamlet. He said, no, not a bit. To follow him thither with modesty enough, likelihood to lead it, as thus. Alexander died, Alexander was buried. Alexander returneth unto dust, the dust of earth, of which we make loam. And why of that loam whereto he was converted, might they not stop a beer barrel? Caesar, same thing, okay? And Hamlet stops because people start to enter. King, Queen, Laertes, and the corpse of Ophelia. Now, he can't tell that it's Ophelia. Why? Her body is wrapped in a shroud. Hamlet asks, who are these? Well, there's the queen, there's courtiers. Who is this they follow? That is, the bier carrying Ophelia is leading them into the churchyard. Hamlet's asking, who's dead? And with such maimed rites means Hamlet is familiar with the burial practice of the Christian church. And he's hearing the prayers that are being offered, and he knows these aren't the right prayers. They're not the correct prayers. They're abbreviated versions. Okay? Something is being left out, and he's wondering why. This doth betoken, that is, the maimed rites, that the course they followed did with desperate hand take its own life. He recognizes what a burial for a suicide looks like. But the person 'twas of some estate. He says, let's hide and listen. Laertes, what ceremony else? That is, what other rites are there to be practiced? Hamlet to Horatio, that's Laertes, a very noble youth. Come on, what else? The priest, her obsequies have been as far enlarged as we have warranty. That is, our prayers, our commemorations of her, we've done everything we can. We can't do any more. Her death was doubtful. And what the priest means by that is, I know what the coroner said, but we all know. And but that great command oversways the order. What does he mean, great command oversways the order? She should in ground unsanctified have lodged till the last trumpet. Hamlet said, previous page, this might, line 68, this might be the pate of a politician, which this ass now overreaches, one that would circumvent God, go around God, break God's law. The priest just said, her death was doubtful, she should, and but that great command oversways the order, she should be buried outside the churchyard. What was the great command that overswayed the order? It was Claudius. Claudius told the priest, she gets buried in hallowed ground. End of discussion. You do what you need to do to bury her there. For charitable prayers, shards, flints, and pebbles should be thrown on her. That is, instead of charitable prayers. Prayers of love for her. Love for her not meaning, oh, we love her so much and we miss her. Charitable prayers meaning prayers of love for her redemption and for her salvation. Instead, what should happen? Rocks, pieces of glass should be thrown at her. Why? Because she's going to hell. Priest doesn't say that, but it's implied because of how suicides were viewed. Yet here she is allowed her virgin krantz, her maiden instruments, and the bringing home of bell and burial. That is, the bells on an incenser. So the body's being incensed, and the bells on the incenser are ringing. Must there be no more done? No more. We should profane, that is, make unholy the service of the dead, to sing a requiem and such rest to her as to peace-parted souls. The soul that parts in peace goes to heaven. She didn't, the priest is suggesting. Laertes, lay her in the earth, and from her fair and unpolluted flesh may violets spring. I tell thee, churlish priest, in other words, you damn idiot, this is my sister, you know. The ministering angel shall my sister be when thou liest howling. Why will the priest, you have to infer this, why will the priest lie howling? Because the priest will go to his grave damned. Not because of what Laertes is saying here. Laertes is saying the priest is not a proper believer. Okay? Hamlet. What? The fair Ophelia? The queen scatters flowers, traditional thing at a funeral. And she says, I hoped thou shouldst have been my Hamlet's wife. Laertes told Ophelia, never gonna happen. Polonius told Ophelia, never gonna happen. Before Ophelia is loosed on Hamlet, beginning of Act 3, at the end of Act 2, what does the queen say to her? She hopes that Ophelia's virtues will do what? Will bring honor to both her and to Hamlet. Because she's suggesting she hopes Ophelia's virtues will bring Hamlet out of his madness. She still thinks Hamlet's madness is because of love for Ophelia. Okay? Question. I think I mentioned this in class. I didn't post it to D2L. I will. I mentioned that actor who, in an interview, posited the possibility. Does Ophelia think about suicide because of Hamlet's to be or not to be speech? She's on the stage. We know, because of the basics of what's in the text, we know she must have heard what Hamlet said. Why? Why do we know that? Because both Claudius and Polonius heard it. They heard the whole thing. They didn't only hear the conversation between Hamlet and Ophelia. It's not like Hamlet sees Ophelia and Ophelia says, hey, Hamlet, let's come over here and talk next to these curtains. They heard everything, okay? So, Laertes leaps into her grave. He says, hold off the earth a while, 2:17, till I have caught her once more in mine arms. He wants to hug her. Well, she's dead. She's the last living person in his family. He doesn't want to let her go. Now pile your dust. carry me with her. Till of this flat a mountain you have made. And Hamlet strides forth, advancing. What is he whose grief bears such an emphasis? Now, he knows who that is. So what does he mean by that? Whose phrase of sorrow conjures the wandering stars and makes them stand like wonder-wounded hearers. This is I, Hamlet the Dane. We've never heard Hamlet speak like that before. So what does he mean? It's like Moses parting the Red Sea. Hamlet is making a dramatic entrance, okay? Has he seen Claudius yet after his return from his trip to England? No, he hasn't. Claudius knows he's alive. This is Hamlet's naked stepping forth. Not literally naked, obviously. And Hamlet leaps into the grave. Why? Is he trying to save Laertes? Laertes grabs him by the throat. The devil take thy soul. Now that is not a very charitable statement. That's not just go to hell. That's go to hell and sleep with Satan, you know. Thou prayest not well. I pray thee take thy fingers from my throat. For though I am not splenitive, meaning I am not rash, I am not filled with anger, yet have I in me something dangerous, which let thy wisdom fear hold off the... Back up, Laertes. King says, separate them. The queen, Hamlet, you know. And Hamlet says, I will fight with him upon this theme until my eyelids will no longer wag. And the Gertrude, what theme, O my son? I loved Ophelia. 40,000 brothers could not, with all their quantity of love, make up my sum. What wilt thou do for her? Meaning, Laertes, what will you do to prove your love for Ophelia? Big question. What does Hamlet mean when he says, I loved Ophelia? You take those words at their literal, what do they obviously mean? He loved her. Okay, so if that's true, why does Hamlet, from the first time we see him interact with Ophelia, why does Hamlet behave the way he does? What causes his actions? What has happened between Hamlet and Ophelia from when we first see Ophelia to when we first see Hamlet and Ophelia together? I mean when we literally see them together. Not when Ophelia tells her father about Hamlet coming into a room. That's hearsay. That's what she says. I mean when we first see them together. We first see them together when? Get thee to a nunnery. It's in that speech right after the to be or not to be. Does that look like Hamlet loves her? What does Hamlet tell Polonius when he asks, do you have a daughter? He says, you know I do. What does he tell Polonius his daughter should do? Keep her out of the sun. Why? So that she won't become a breeder of sinners or a breeder of maggots. Reading into it, what's he saying? Lock her up. Why? Because men are dangerous. Then when he sees her and he speaks with her after the to be or not to be, he says, he emphasizes again and again, get thee to a nunnery. Why? Because men are errant knaves. He says, I loved you once, and then he says, I didn't love you. You shouldn't have believed me. I didn't love you. Get thee to a nunnery again and again. Why? Anybody remember? It's not literally his final word to her, but after that part about get thee to a nunnery and how we cannot inoculate our old stock, etc., with virtue, he says something. He says, don't believe any of us. I could be weird. Well, take that back. I definitely am weird. I think Hamlet is suggesting to her there, don't believe anything I'm saying other than get thee to a nunnery. Meaning what? Everything I've just said to you, Ophelia, it's not true. So when he says, I didn't love you, if that's not true, then I do love you, get thee to a nunnery can just mean go get in seclusion. Why? Because this is a world where errant knaves crawl on the ground. And what's his implication? We, all of us, are sinners. And we just lead and cause more sin. That could be Hamlet's not successful way of trying to protect her. Instead, she ends up dead. Why does she end up dead? Is it solely because of Polonius's death? No. It's also because of what happens to Hamlet. What does she say when Hamlet finally leaves in that scene in Act 3, Scene 1? Oh, to have seen what I have seen, to see what I see. She sees Hamlet, who she thought was the paragon of virtue, beauty, martial prowess, brilliant, all that stuff. Now, totally devoid of reason. Is that the first, hit of the domino that starts her on her way to craziness? The king, he's mad, Laertes. The queen, for love of God, forbear him. That is, don't hurt him. Hamlet, show me what you'll do, Laertes. Will you weep? Will you fight? Will you fast? Will you tear thyself? Will you drink up Isel? Eat a crop? I'll do it and more. Do you come here to whine? I'll do it too. You come here to outface me with leaping in her grave? Be buried? So will I. And if thou prate of mountains, that is, he said, throw a mountain on me. If thou prate of mountains, let them throw millions of acres on us, till our ground, singeing is paid against the burning zone, make also, I'll rant as well as thou. The queen, this is mere madness. Is it? He's in a grave and he's saying, throw the whole world on me. If it is madness, what kind of madness is it? Is Hamlet acting here? Is he putting on an antic disposition? Or is this the real madness for love? People often do crazy, stupid things for love. And thus a while the fit will work on him, says Gertrude. Hamlet, what is the reason that you use me thus? Use me. Hamlet's talking about Laertes' attempt to kill him. I loved you ever. That is, we were always friends. But it's no matter. Let Hercules himself do what he may. The cat will mew and dog will have his day. In other words, it doesn't matter. Hamlet's saying, the clock is ticking. He knows his time is coming. The king, Horatio, wait upon him. Get Hamlet out of the grave, take him and calm him down. Okay? Laertes, strengthen your patience in our last night's speech. What has he just told Laertes? We're going to go through with our plot. What's the plot? Fencing match. You'll either kill Hamlet by puncturing with your sword, by cutting him with your sword and the poison, or we'll kill him by him drinking the poison. Okay? We'll stop there. We'll pick up with scene 2 on Friday, and we'll finish this on Friday. Okay? I'll put up a quiz on Friday after we finish Act 5. And then probably the beginning of next week, I'll put up the drama exam, which covers all the drama we've done. It'll be open for probably about a week, okay?